Welcome, everyone, to Ladder Daily Digest. We honor creators, and today our special guest is Adam Power, who I happen to know, and we'll talk about that later in a special way. But welcome to the show, Adam.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to be with you.
So I think Adam is the very first podcaster I ever knew in person.
What an honor.
Yeah. And it was like, I don't know, did you start in like 2018 or?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that I'm, primarily a podcaster. It's, I guess I started around that time. We were doing my partner Lisa and I were doing this libertarian atheist podcast, and no, it must have been before.
Earlier?
It must have been earlier because it was pre-Trump, and
okay,
Trump won,
so 2000
won.
Early 2016, maybe during the primaries.
Yeah, so I was really hyped up about Ron Paul for a while, and I got really into politics about the time when I started having children. And right. Particularly when my son was born, I really started thinking a lot about politics and
like the future,
especially war,
what your son was going to grow up into, what environment.
Yeah, what I tell people that aren't parents is when my children were born, I felt like I went a little crazy. Like my total, mental just kind of shifted, and I wouldn't say I'm, father of the year or anything like that, but I definitely developed a certain, let's say, paranoia. That was my sort of protective instinct around them. And it caused me to reevaluate a lot of things, from politics to religion. And that was also part of the reason why I had my, faith crisis and stuff. And eventually, ended up leaving the Mormon church.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and talk about what young Adam Power was like. Where'd you grow up?
Yeah.
And what was your level of activity in church?
So my parents met at BYU. So it was a pretty classic story. My mother was a Utahn. She had, pioneer polygamist ancestry, going back pretty far. My dad was, a country bumpkin, living in Arizona. And after his mission in Anaheim, he went to Brigham Young University, and he met my mother. And
were you conceived? Were you conceived at Wymount?
I never asked them, but I assume it was somewhere in the Provo region. Provo is where I was ultimately born.
Okay.
And so we just spent a few years there before moving to Arizona. Then about the time I was in third grade, we moved to Bakersfield, California, and I pretty much did the majority of growing up there.
So were you baptized in Arizona or in Bakersfield?
I was baptized in Arizona.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think we left, I was about 9.
Do you remember, was it like a big family event?
Yeah. It was a lot of people. Not just.
Were you like Simba, being raised up to the family?
Well, at that age, everything's
the example.
Yeah. And it might as well have been. And I will say that the main thing that I remember from that experience was feeling close to my dad. He was the one that performed the baptism, and it was one of the core memories of positive memories, I'd say, of us going through that together.
And you had like grandparents there too, right?
I'm a little fuzzy on that, but I'm pretty sure at least my Arizona grandparents were there. I'm not sure if the Utah ones were there. I never got as close to them. We don't hate each other, but like we only see each other seldomly. And part of that was just proximity or whatever. Sure. I would go to Utah with my mom in the summers, but I would mostly hang out with my cousins. This is in the era of cousins. It seems like a lot of that is not as prevalent anymore. People had less children. The boomers, they boomed, as the name suggests. And so I remember having a big, reunion for my grandparents on my mom's side. And I mean, there's just a legion of human beings that came from these two people. And I look at, I do Sunday dinner with my dad still. And I mean, it's just a handful of us that are there.
Right. So do you remember being in primary? Did you remember remembering memorizing the articles of faith? Were you good at that?
Yeah, I was good at that. I was always good at memorization. And my dad was a theater teacher, so I got exposed to theater and thus memorization pretty early on, and I got used to that. I'd never liked primary. I used to be embarrassed to bring people to church because they would go to primary, and I felt that like the songs were really infantile, and I was eager to learn. I was more of a student, and I really didn't get interested in religion until seminary. So when I started high school, and I was a pretty faithful seminary goer, but the big reason for that is that the teacher was really good. He kind of approached it more as a history class than he did as Sunday school. Now, I mean, he would bear his testimony and stuff, but he would go on.
It was more about learning than testimony building.
Correct. Yeah, it was. He would go on these long excursions. He'd go to like Israel and stuff and bring back artifacts. He built like a little model of the like ancient sort of mobile temple in the Old Testament, according to the measurements in the scriptures. And like he was really interested in like what a cubit was, right? For instance.
Was he on the younger side or middle-aged or older?
Yeah, I would say, I think he was like a young father at the time. He had kids around maybe just a little younger than me at the time. He had a little bit of money and he could afford to be a nerd. And so he got into it, and he got me into it as a result, because I didn't feel like it was as much of the kumbaya stuff as much as it was like, oh, let's learn what this really was. I remember when we did Book of Mormon one year, he, made an alphabet out of like Mayan symbols, and like gave that I don't know how much of this was even legitimate, but it was certainly impressive to a young guy, who doesn't know anything.
Yeah. And you were sick of the childish things.
I was really sick of it.
About primary. And now you're a budding adult. You're learning things.
Yeah. I mean, I was really curious about stuff. Like, my dad would sprinkle deep doctrine at me, like he was Bruce R. McConkie, and I would kind of chew on that stuff. And a lot of
Adam God theory.
Yeah. Well, and he presented it like it was false. Right. But I remember one of the sort of like faith promoting rumors, if you want to call it that, like some of the myth lore. Because I mean, there's a fine line between what like Bruce R. McConkie would say the church is and the sort of Paul Bunyan, Pecos Bill aspect that my dad made it out to be.
Yeah. Culture.
And so like he said that like Cain survived the flood.
Right. And he was Bigfoot, maybe.
And he was Bigfoot, and like it was very American. Like he was really into comic books growing up, and he was an animator. He likes to say he paid for my birth with cartoons. And I think that made me interested in it because it was more impressive, I thought, yeah, church is boring, but there's all this like great mythology behind it, that's really interesting.
Right.
So I was always like, yeah, like, tell me more. Let's talk more about this. And then I'd go to Sunday school on Sundays and they'd be like, so what does faith mean to you? And I'd be like, oh, here we go. Even at a young age.
Right. And you wouldn't say Bigfoot?
Yeah. No. And I would, at the MTC, I would have debates with people about doctrine, and that would be like a lot of fun to me.
So we had a girl who would always, like, sometimes a Sunday school class as a teenager, the teacher would run out of material and they didn't want to just send the kids off running through the chapel area or whatever.
Yeah.
And so they'd say, does anybody have any questions? And this one girl, every single time, tell us about the signs of the times. When is the millennium coming?
Oh, right.
Did you have any type of feel that Jesus might come in your lifetime?
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, my dad would tell me that it was likely that I would see the second coming.
And would he say, you're a power and you're going to be leading the group that's going to be welcoming Jesus back?
I think he always had grandiose visions of what I would become. I am disappointingly mediocre in just about every aspect of life. But like, yeah, I think he was not an unsupportive parent. I say he was, he's still around. Even today, he's a very supportive guy. He wants me to run for president like half the time. And I'm like, I'm not that corrupt. I don't have those kinds of connections.
You have principles, damn it.
Or anything. I'm nobody, and he's like, you'd be great, and he's adorable for that. I appreciate that.
He's got a lot of confidence in you.
Yeah, I don't know where it's completely misplaced, but appreciated on some level. But of course, it also created a lot of pressure too, and I think I did buckle under some of that pressure, but that was more later on in life, So childhood was pretty good. I was kind of like Dad's little all-star. My mom was also present, presumably, for a lot of this.
Were you planning on going to BYU, or did you think about your career in high school at all?
Oh, yeah. I thought about my future from a young age. I wanted to be a professional wrestler, and then I wanted to be a zookeeper, and then I wanted to be president for a while.
Right.
And my first real, like, I think I'm actually going to do this with my life, is I wanted to be a therapist. I wanted to be like a relationship marriage therapist.
Okay.
I thought that would be really cool, and like try to keep families together. That was because I saw, well, my parents are still together, right? And so we've cracked the code, obviously.
But you had friends who had parents split up, and you thought you could help your friends' families.
I mean, of course, I was woefully naive, but I had good intentions, I suppose. And but I got recruited, not into the military, but to the art institutes. They had a recruiter come by to our high school. As I mentioned, my dad was an animator. So when I was a young guy drawing pictures, he wouldn't put it on the fridge necessarily, at least not until he had fixed the anatomy, right? Like he would turn it into a lesson. And so he'd want to like rework everything. And I used to get really frustrated, but I did get a lot better. And so I was easily the best artist in my high school. It wasn't until college where I was like, oh, I kind of suck,
And your dad thought that you were better than he was.
Well, at some things, like even nowadays, he's better at some things than me. He got really into like perspective and backgrounds, mechanics. He does some really awesome stuff, rendering even now. But like, he basically abandoned color as like something to even work
so
on.
Pencil, charcoal.
Yeah, so he's really
black
into
and white.
Like pen and stuff like that. So yeah, just black and white, maybe one color if you're lucky. But I got into the digital realm, because that's the generation I grew up in. So, I even nowadays, part of my job is my full-time job is I teach digital art. So
right.
I do painting and Photoshop and that sort of thing.
Right. And so, but what did you do? Because you also were preparing for a mission.
Yeah.
And so were you Peter Priesthood?
I mean, no, I would not say it was Peter Priesthood, but I was fairly stalwart, right? I think I was more like a J. Golden Kimball, where I was like, I'm going to study this stuff. I'm going to know about this stuff and I'm going to be with it. But sometimes I'm going to say a curse word, right?
Right.
Sometimes I'm going to be a little rough around the edges. I could see myself growing a beard in the future, which I obviously did. I could see myself wearing blue on Sundays sometimes. I didn't have a lot of respect for the little minutia rules. I didn't care for parting my hair or whatever. But I felt like I knew religion better than any of my friends, which I did, not because I knew anything, but because they literally knew nothing. Because they're just like, I don't know, man. I'm watching Rugrats and Ren and Stimpy. I don't actually read this Bible that I profess to believe in.
Did your dad talk about his mission a lot and glorify his experiences?
I mean, who doesn't? Anybody who goes on a mission talks about their mission like constantly.
Right. Did you feel pressure, or did you sort of feel like your ward helped shape you? Like, yeah, I'm going on a mission, whatever.
Well, yeah, it was definitely a natural order of things, right? I remember thinking, this is not like me to be a missionary. Like, this is not who I would be naturally. But that's okay, because, I'm going to go through a big, hard milestone in life. And so I'm going to do something I wouldn't normally do, right? And it's going to make my parents happy. I just had a big breakup. And so I wasn't thinking I'm going to get married right now. I hadn't even started college yet, so I was like, this is a really good time to go figure out what I'm about. Not to mention, I should say this, during my senior year of high school, 9/11 happened. And so, I mean, you can imagine that the recruiters were like flies at the time. And I took the ASVAB in high school, not knowing what it was. I just knew that my girlfriend was taking a test and it could get you out of class. So I went and I took it, and I guess I did pretty well, because they were calling me. I wouldn't learn until later that they kind of did that to a lot of people, but they were like, oh yeah, we're going to bump you up all these ranks. And I'm like, I don't know what any of these ranks mean. And I had an eagle because, of course, at the time the church was really tied up in Boy Scouts. And it was like, you did not dishonor your mom by not having an eagle. Right.
Right.
And so, like, I went and got one. And so, I was headed that way, but there was enough doubt about what the war was about, like about whether or not it was a righteous war. Like, this was not World War II. The enemies aren't wearing uniforms. They kind of like dying. Maybe this is actually low key about oil, right? I don't know, but there's enough doubt there to say maybe this isn't a righteous war. So I would say when I was younger, I was thinking, okay, if a war came, I would make that a priority, right? Because I'll serve the country or whatever, and that's an honorable way of becoming a young man if you're not going to do a mission, right?
Right.
And I was definitely not one of these guys that was going to do both. Hell no. No, dying was scary. So I think the mission was, it was the way I chose to go through my passage from child to adult.
Right. And let's cover real quick. Your dad was the drama instructor at your high school.
Yeah.
And he would allow you to, would you have your choice of parts, or did you have to earn?
Well, I'll say this. I will say I think all my parts were well earned. When I was a freshman, I didn't have big parts, right? I had very bit parts, but I would sneak into things because, frankly, the what's the word I'm looking for? The sort of bad view, the negative way people perceive things.
About drama.
Yeah, well, about being a young man in theater, right?
Okay.
I graduated in 2002.
So typecast, or what do you call that?
It was.
It's not what strapping. It's not what strapping young men does.
Yes, exactly, right. And so it was Bakersfield, California. It was 2002. It was super homophobic. I didn't know. I knew of like one out person in my like class of 2,000 people. Right.
Theater was effeminate.
Theater was effeminate, but I had grown up being told theater is okay, right? And so I would win almost by default, right? Because I could read, I could memorize, I knew how to like take directions, and I was okay. I was okay at acting. I never really got around to learning singing and dancing very well, but I did a little bit.
What was your favorite role?
So my favorite role was probably, I would say Applegate from Damn Yankees was my favorite role. And Applegate, by the way, is the devil in that play. And he does have a solo, but you can kind of comedy talk your way through it a little bit. And so I was able to get away with a little bit of murder there. And then I was also in Dr. Faustus. And so that was even more about sort of Christian mythology, right? And my girlfriend at the time played the spirit of lust, which is hilarious. So she
typecast.
She really was. And, so she helped drag me down to hell because this was the Marlowe version of the play, not the Gerda one. So my dad and I are funny because we are like deceptively cultured. Like if you meet us, you're like, oh, those guys, they don't know anything. But like, I was well exposed to Shakespeare. And to
like see your dad, if he wasn't Mormon, you just think, oh, he's a beer swilling football couch potato.
And only 2 out of 3 things of that would be right,
right.
Yet no beer for this guy, no beer whatsoever. Right. But I mean, like he was telling me who like Moliere was, and Cervantes and all these other playwrights. And so like, and then of course we grew up with the King James version of the Bible, which has similar poetic language, right?
Right, to Shakespeare, because people think Shakespeare wrote the Bible.
Right. There's definitely a subset, right? There's definitely some people out there that think that. But anyway, on summers, we would go to Camp Shakespeare in Cedar City, Utah, except for one year where we went to Ashland, Oregon, and maybe this is jumping ahead a little bit, but that's my wife and I would realize that we had probably been there the same year. We had seen the same shows long before we had met. So we were both theater people. I was an actor and she was a tech, and but we of course didn't know each other until after my mission.
So as you're getting ready for your mission, did you go to a year of college first?
No, I didn't. I went straight from high school. So there was like 9 months there where I wasn't doing a lot. So I've been really into Dungeons and Dragons most of my life. So I had a group I was playing with, and I would put church things in that sometimes. I would try to be subtle about it because I almost all my friends were non-members. I couldn't get along with Mormons the same way I could get along with non-Mormons, and I never dated a Mormon.
Right. You were putting Mormon cookies. You were putting Mormon cookies into the game in case the missionaries came over in the future of their lives.
That was the idea, right?
They would they would say, "Oh, something clicks about this."
Yeah, I thought I was a Benedite, right? But I was going to do it through, because one thing that would really annoy me, and this is something that my dad does that irritates me, is, you know, you would be very much like standing in holy places, right? And it's like, yeah, but Jesus hung out with like the sinners, right? Like he hung out with the prostitutes and the pimps and the gamblers and the
tax collectors.
Yeah, all these you know, rich people, you know, undesirables, right? Or what Hillary Clinton would have called the basket of deplorables, right? And so he was always more standoffish with that stuff. He'd be more likely to like walk out of the theater because of a joke he didn't like, which is
a swear word.
You know, especially if my mom was around, he'd be extra sensitive, right? Mm-hmm. But I never felt that way. I always felt like you remember that? You remember Mormon ads? They were like OG memes, basically, but for Mormon kids. And they had this one where it was like a fly on an ice cream sundae. And they're like, "Would you eat this?" And I'm like,
Yeah.
You
scoop a little bit where the fly is.
Yeah, you throw that part out. It, but look how much more ice cream there is, right? And so I always felt like people were throwing the baby out with the bathwater and distancing themselves with this holier than thou attitude.
You were almost like, "Hey, we could live in the world and of the world and still be Mormon."
Like, well, how do you do ministry and not be in the world?
Right.
You know, that's ridiculous, right? You got to meet people where they're at. And that'll lead me to my mission president and why I feel like he was such a
and you're so basically Dungeons and Dragons was your mission prep.
It really was in a lot of ways. It was just a way to tell stories. It was a way to deliver information. Mm-hmm. And you know, I was one of the few kids that actually paid attention in seminary. You know, and so I would have talks with other students, and again, I thought I was smart because they were just ill-informed.
Were you in the beginnings of getting your mission call? Was a big thing where people come over and you open your envelope?
Oh yeah. I mean, people people from the ward like came over and they like gave me money and stuff. You know, there were bets placed. Now, I was very patriotic in high school, and I didn't like my French teacher, so I had a bad attitude about France. Because again, it's around that time where we're talking about like freedom fries and stuff,
right?
And you know, my parents were kind of conservative, mostly conservative, but also, you know, they're definitely not. They wouldn't have been Trumpers,
right? Because they're loving people from I know.
They are really loving, generous, good people. You know, not. Like, they're taken in by this stuff, but
your dad was aware of differences, but he was accepting of all kinds of different peoples.
But a lot of people in my family are Trumpers, and I just shake my head, and I just go, how in the world can you get there? I mean, even from a religious perspective. I mean, in the evangelicals, I mean, I'm incredulous. You know how they can be like, yeah, this is our guy. It's like, dude, that's like exactly who you don't want to be, right?
It's like, I'm going to vote for Satan because he stands for the things I believe in.
This guy would say he was better than Jesus if he was in the same room as Jesus, right? Like he would feel insecure and feel the need to start like comparing himself, right? Anyway.
That's right. Well, so anyway, so you get your call to France, and now you're thinking,
Oh yeah, everybody had a good laugh at my expense, right? Because I had such a bad attitude.
Is the Lord trying to humble you?
Oh yeah, that was the idea, right? Like it actually added to the idea that it was divine because, you know, never mind that I had put on my application that I had like 4 years of French.
That's right.
You know, never mind that. No, it was that I had said rude things. And so anyway, I get my mission call to France, and once my time comes, I mean, I got my suits. I got all fitted up, and I went. And I was definitely not going to come home early. That was never on the list. That was never.
So you
failure was not an option.
Right. Dishonorable discharge was not something that you were going to. You
Like,
would rather come home in a pine box than
correct. Yeah, for sure. For sure, because to me it was
family.
Like, it was like a Native American vision quest, right? It was like you're just, how are you going to get a suitable mate if you haven't gone through something, right? Like, how do you? So I had no idea my father-in-law was going to be this like hippy dippy, easy.
Everything goes Mormon.
Everything goes kind of, whatever. I was always expecting, this very stern sort of proctor type, with a shotgun that he would, pet like it was a cat, if I didn't make a certain amount of money, right? And so,
or play football at BYU,
right? You would have liked that, but
right.
Yeah, I did not get as into sports. My dad was really into the Phoenix Suns. And the Phoenix Suns would just never win. And in the late 90s, of course, they had that great run while they had Charles Barkley, and they went to the championship against who? The Chicago Bulls.
Oh, the Bulls, right.
And it was like one of the greatest teams in the history of the NBA. It was Michael Jordan in his heyday. It was Scottie Pippen, who would have been Michael Jordan had Michael Jordan not existed. And my personal favorite, Dennis Rodman, because the only thing I was good at in basketball was rebounding. So he was my guy, and he had fun hair.
And you wanted all his tattoos.
Yeah, I wanted to
get him.
I liked that he was edgy and that he was weird and unique. He wasn't boring. If it wasn't so tied up in politics, I would want a Cybertruck. I will say that. If it wasn't so politically loaded, because they're weird. They're so weird. And I love that, I don't even think they look good necessarily, but they're so unique compared to other cars. So,
right.
And when I was younger, I liked PT Cruisers, and then I learned they were like the worst cars ever. So
you were telling me that when you first got on your mission, you were snapping a lot of pictures, and that took your mission president, made him have an attitude toward you.
By the way, he never told me about that until the end of my mission, until like my exit interview. And it was like, when we first met, I thought you were pretty much worthless because you were taking pictures. And I was like, okay. Of course, at the time, I was like, oh, no, sir. I was always faithful and good. Of course,
I was in France
because of your teaching. It's only now that I look back where I go, wow, this guy was the worst. This guy was a real jerk. And he definitely acted nice in a way, but he was just so dead wrong about the way he saw life. And he was not a good fit for me. And he gave me very little chance to provide. He never gave me anyone to train, ever. And I wanted to be a trainer. He let me be a district leader, but they'll let a drunk monkey be a district leader.
As long as you can count and call the.
You don't even have to do that much.
Zone.
You just tell the zone leaders. They're the ones that have to have brains, kind of. I was.
Right, so what do? You call the zone leaders and you say, put in whatever numbers you want us to have, and we did that.
Yeah, I was like, well, what counts as a lesson? What constitutes a lesson this week? Because remember, we're in France, so this is unbelievably a waste of time to do all of it. France was such a dead end. We had no business being there. I learned a lot, not because of the church, but because of, in spite of the church, I learned a lot about the universe. Because the people in France were so good to me in so many ways.
They were nice. Come in and tell us what you're doing here from America.
Yeah,
right?
they're like, hey, you're from America. That's interesting. Like let's talk about that.
So you would try to whip a lesson on them, and then what did they say?
Yes, I'm in Crespa. That's what. Yeah, just I'm not interested. But
why weren't they interested?
But do you know Snoop Dogg? Right, like that's the question.
But they weren't interested in Mormonism because they've already researched Mormonism.
Yeah, they could just Google
and you did polygamy.
Yeah, no, and I would teach people sometimes. They come back the next day, they'd be an expert. And they'd be like, well, they learned about polygamy. I was like, well, drat. You weren't supposed to learn about that until you were already, all the way in, pretty much.
And they'd say, I learned about polygamy, so I'm done.
And I remember being really irritated that polygamy had been allowed to happen and withholding priesthood from the blacks, not because of those things were inherently not just, but because they made my job harder, and God should have known better. And so I was very irritated. I mean, man, let me tell you, I tried so hard to get the spirit in every meeting. This was around the time that Preach My Gospel had come out, and I read that thing every day. I practically ate the pages. And I would sit there. I would get investigators down on their knees with me, praying for God to show us something, and God would never come through. And I, of course, whose fault was that, right? It was my fault. And so I always blame myself for every failure. You
were probably thinking about your girlfriend, or thinking that God was an idiot for doing polygamy.
Well, I think,
or you didn't wake up early enough, or
right, yeah, something like I had a dirty thought. There were 3 times in that 2-year mission I masturbated, right? And like I remember them because they were like so rare, and I would be so disappointed in myself, right? And I would call the mission president, tell him I had done this, so I could be absolved to get the spirit back,
right?
And so.
But then who knows how long that lasts in God's mind?
Oh yeah, because
if you don't have a baptism for a month, or 2 months, or 3 months, or 4 months, because that's probably what's the average anyway.
Yeah,
you would think it was because you masturbated.
Oh, absolutely. And people would ask me to give them blessings, and I'd be like, "Oh man, I had unclean thoughts like a week ago, and God probably knows that." And so, I'm not going to be able to do this blessing right. And so I got really, really good at blaming myself for everything. Right. And like, on the one hand, I do like the idea that like I learned not to blame other people, but like, I was entrusting, my faith in something that didn't exist, based on a person who was a bad person, who was a grifter.
Meaning Joseph Smith.
Meaning Joseph Smith. And, further on by, some of my home ward leaders that sucked, but most of them were fine people. But like definitely for my mission president, it was like, oh man, you thought about a girl's leg? Well, good luck getting the spirit, loser. Like, he was crazy enough. He said one time at a zone conference that he walked backwards into a grocery store because they had an advertisement for women's lotion or something. And of course, in France, they're a lot more liberal about bodies, particularly the female form. And, that's just part of life over there. And so, and you're not there to like learn about their culture and to figure out their culture. You're there to impose yours, and my mission president would say this a lot. Like, you're not here to learn, you're here to teach.
So advertisements in France would feature topless women.
maybe not always topless necessarily,
scantily.
But there was a lot of skin. And then one of my earliest areas was, on the Riviera, right? And so we would go street contacting on the boardwalk. And one of my companions was French, and it wouldn't bother him at all. But I would look over, and there are breasts everywhere. And the internet hadn't come a long way before I had left, right? I was downloading crap from LimeWire, BearShare, because Napster had gone under, right? That's where we were at. So
right, it would take 2.5 minutes for a nice picture to download back then. Right,
exactly. So I had very little exposure. I had stuff with my girlfriend, but when you're 19 years old, you're addicted to something you've never even experienced. I remember one time this very lovely French girl gets into an elevator, same elevator that my companion and I are in, and she's not doing anything. She's just a couple inches in front of me because it's an elevator. It's tight. And I just get barely the scent of her hair. And my skin flushes. Every hair is standing on. And I'm sure I'm about to bust right there for no reason. Right?
Pheromones.
Because I'm just starving. I'm salivating, right? And, I kept my composure. I would never want someone to feel uncomfortable like that. But you're going crazy. At least I was. They say redheads get it worse, so maybe that's it.
There you go.
I don't know, but anyway, it was hard to keep it together, but we did. We kept it together. I was a pretty faithful missionary, I will say. I had one area where I didn't do so hot, but I didn't do anything morally wrong, right? There was this internet cafe we would go to, and I'd go play video games sometimes.
Right.
And I felt awful about that, of course.
Right. Almost as bad as masturbating.
Yeah, almost. Not quite.
But, so you survive your mission. You go home with honors.
Yeah.
Everybody says you did it. And now you're ready to go to college.
Yep.
And where do you go from Bakersfield?
So I go to college at the San Francisco Art Institute. And it is, it's a fun experience, I will say, I'm living in the Bay Area. I had always told myself that if I ended up going to BYU, I would probably end up leaving the church because I couldn't stand Mormons. Right. And wanting to stay in the Mormon church, I was like, I'll go to the belly of the beast. Right. I'll do the opposite because that's my personality. Right. And I'll be able to reach out to all these people. And I did.
And you're being just like Jesus.
Well, that's what I thought. Right. I thought that was the goal. And, of course, I heard about the honor code and I was beside myself. I was I had patterned my whole look after Joseph Smith. Right. I got sideburns the moment I got home. Right. The moment I got home, I just squeezed real hard. Bam. My sideburns popped out of my head. And I was like, I'm going to be just like these guys, right? I thought it was such a cool aesthetic. And so the idea that Brigham Young could not go to Brigham Young University because he famously had a neck beard, It's kind of funny to think that nowadays, Jesus certainly, he had a full beard. But it is kind of funny that Brigham Young nowadays, if he was alive now, he'd be like a Redditor, right? He'd be like this edgy guy on 4chan, posting crap. He'd be wearing a fedora.
Yeah, and I think Joseph Smith would be a podcaster myself.
Oh yeah, no, for real.
He'd be an influencer.
He'd be in the Trump administration. I think Kristi Noem is Joseph Smith. I think that's the reincarnated Joseph Smith. Or who's the one that runs all the press conferences? The blonde. God, she is the worst. I forget what her name is, but she's one of these Trump whores, and she's so fake. All she does is lie and cover and spin.
It's so funny because every time you ask a question like, "What about Trump doing this?" Well, what about Biden? He did stuff.
It's always whataboutism. It's like, dude, the man was a corpse. Like, that's the standard? Yeah, of course he did bad. Yeah, I mean, but did he do it January 6th? No, he didn't do that. I mean, he wouldn't have had the energy to do it.
Caroline Levitt.
Caroline Levitt, that's it. Oh my gosh, she is one of my least favorite human beings on the planet. I can't believe a person like that can look at themselves in the mirror and sleep at night. Like, and so it makes me think, like, are you so dense that you don't understand, or are you like so
blind to humanity,
evil? I think she's got to be evil. She doesn't strike me as stupid.
Right. She's pretty though.
Like Kristi Noem, I think is stupid, but like, yeah.
So anyhow, you're going to school, Art Institute.
So I graduate there. While I'm there, of course, I meet my future wife on a blind date, who I end up getting into contact with through Dungeons and Dragons, through my singles ward, because I was not the only heathen that existed that would play such a game. And of course, that young lady was your daughter.
That's right. And she was on Christmas break from going to BYU.
She was going to be the third wheel for her cousin and her cousin's fiance at the time. And they were going to call a different guy, and he ended up not being available. And so they called me instead, and I almost didn't go because I was playing Neverwinter Nights at the time, and I was enjoying myself on a quiet evening. And then I thought, don't be a loser, go on a date,
That's right. Because you weren't too sure about this person's cousin.
I wasn't, I don't know if she'll ever watch this, but, right. I doubt she will. But let's say I wasn't impressed. I'm sure she would say the same.
Right.
And
because she
remember I was the second choice.
Yeah. She suggested somebody else first.
First it was somebody
You were
else.
the backup plan. Well, if nobody else can come, maybe Adam.
Yeah, so I remember thinking to myself, because I was so egotistical at this age, I wasn't fat yet. And so I was like, I'll give this ugly girl a thrill, it'll be great. And
just like girls are told to say yes at dances to all the boys that are building up courage to ask a girl to dance.
Right. It's just
you were going to pay it forward.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that was one thing about Mormon culture I did kind of like, was that like I was taught early that you don't get to expect anything, but other than a yes to like a first date, like you're going to be able to get a shot, but that shot guarantees you nothing. And so there's some positivity in that. Cause like, you kind of dated, quote unquote, like almost everybody, until you met the right one. Right. So anyway, I fell in love with Krista very quickly. And
she goes back off to BYU, to school.
She goes back to BYU. And we're doing is like emailing and calling, but we're doing that thing where we call and we talk for 3 hours. Right. And especially for a guy, that you're Twitter pated if you spend more than 10 minutes on the phone. Right.
Right.
So,
and then she comes home for the summer.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, so you're able to date and spend more time.
Yeah.
And here's how I'll say it. If it's okay with you.
Yeah. Go for it.
It's time to start to get a little serious, but the fall is coming, and General Conference is coming up.
Yeah.
And you both watch General Conference, and you hear all the talks that say, don't let anything get in the way of getting married. And she hears all the talks that say, don't let anything get in the way of going on a mission.
Right. Yeah.
And she had been preparing to go on a mission for a few years.
Well, the day we met, I said,
yeah,
she told me almost immediately she was thinking about going on a mission, and that she was actually, quite keen on doing so. And I had been impressed by all the sister missionaries I had known. And there was only like one or two that kind of fit the stereotype that you hear about. Most of them were beautiful, were incredibly intelligent, charismatic, clean, just lovely people. And so I remember I told her on that first blind date, oh, I think you absolutely should do that, because it's just sister missionaries at the best.
Right, because you want the person raising your family's children.
Oh yeah,
to be a former missionary, a return missionary.
I mean, I started to feel like I wanted an RM as well, right?
And and that's a little bit different. You are a little bit different, because I've heard people say that sister missionaries are intimidating, and they're never going to marry a sister missionary because they're intimidating. And so that's where you're a little bit different, is that you had enough self-confidence, like, yeah, I can marry a sister missionary, return missionary.
In a way, I was very feminist for my considering the universe I'd grown up in. Like, even though my mother was very traditional, there was like no question that she was the smarter person in the house, growing up.
And we'll let people know that this is Prop 8 is happening.
Yeah.
Right
Prop 8's happening. I don't think Prop 8 gets resolved either, like until like the latter part of her mission, maybe even around when she gets home. But yeah,
but it's in the thick of things.
Was in 2008, which is about when I graduated, which was a great time, by the way, to graduate from college. If only there had been a prophecy or a revelator who could have told me that there was a financial crash coming. That would have been really handy.
That's right. The financial crash causes a restriction in employment.
Yeah. Well, not to mention, I mean, I'm already trying to get into, a vocation where the entry-level jobs are all, outsourced to Singapore. So they tell me, you want to, move to Singapore. I'm not super keen on doing that. And I was told that I would have this degree and here's how much money I would make. And so I wasn't willing to take things that I saw as beneath me, which is the opposite of what I tell students nowadays. I say, if you can work for free if you can. Like if you have family support or something, just do anything to get in. Anything that's beyond like coffee, anything that's like vaguely related to your vocation, just get in and do it. So anyway, I had the wrong mindset. I had a degree that would turn out not to be worth a whole lot, because the Art Institute is now defunct. And I ended up moving back to Arizona with the family in order to take up a teaching job over here. And so, yeah, that was that's kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but
right. And like, was it Jacob that had to wait for his wife?
Yeah.
You almost had to wait 7 years for.
It felt that way.
It's a good thing I didn't have any other daughters.
I would
marry this other daughter first.
For real. Even Kevin was starting to look kind of cute for a little while.
That's right.
I was good. No, not really, but I was definitely. But I was, I've always been a faithful, loyal guy. And once I decided that she was the person I wanted, I mean, I latched onto her like a bulldog. And, even while she was gone, I would go visit you guys all the time. I mean,
and we would have discussions. And when Prop 8 was happening, you told me that Prop 8 was just bigoted. And to me,
I had strong feelings.
That was not a typical Mormon thing to hear.
No, definitely not.
So, but it made me think, and I tell people that you made me a little bit more liberal, and I made you a little bit more conservative in our talking, because we talk things out and we listen to each other, and we weren't like,
I wasn't used to that. I was not used to someone who is significantly, not to call you old, but like, someone who is higher in the age hierarchy, let's say, that would really listen to me. Because like the French would be like, get out of here, you know nothing. And even for my father, it was always like, you're the kid. Right. And so we'll hear you out until I'm bored. Right. Or until I'm convinced that you're wrong. And then I'm just going to dismiss everything.
It's like children are to be seen and not heard. And we'll tell you when you're an adult.
It really was. My dad's very, minded with hierarchy. He saw his father as this sort of paragon, and I was skeptical from a young age. And but I also understood that children didn't understand everything, and that at the end of the day, you had to kind of like just trust people that had your best interest in mind. It wasn't until later that I would have to take that with a grain of salt. But I always had a little skepticism. I always had a little doubt, but I would push it down because I had a strong sense of justice.
So Krista comes home from her mission.
Yeah.
We'll get to that. And you guys are preparing for a wedding.
Yeah.
And certain things happen that delay it a little bit. I tell each of you, you know what? You could each do better.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
But,
I still puzzle about that one. I still contemplate.
It was sort of like I was saying, marriage is hard, right? And you better be sure.
Especially for you at the time. You had a real rough go of it for a while there. And you guys.
Yeah, so I was sort of losing as you were helping me be a little bit more liberal and see things from a broader viewpoint, just like Mark Twain said, travel is death to prejudice or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
I was beginning to feel sort of like that. I was starting to listen to other sources. Right around that time, somebody came to the Oakland Temple and said, hey, a black guy had the priesthood in the 1800s. And I was like, what? And it was people from the Genesis group that were like a black congregation in Salt Lake that were being told in the 60s and 70s, hey, you guys, if you're faithful, God will bless you, right? And so they learned more Black history. And so they came and made a presentation. And it was almost like the start of what the Gospel Topics essays and the Joseph Smith papers, like, let's start being a little bit more truthful to our members. And even if we're not going to be truthful in the lessons, we're going to have resources and we're going to have extracurricular activities that will broaden their horizons, let's say. And so I started to think, well, it was just prejudice that the blacks didn't have the priesthood.
Yeah.
And then I thought, well, God always loved his children. He always loved the blacks, just like all those other children.
Yeah, but it wasn't just prejudice. It was straight up racism.
Yeah, racism. And so I thought, well, God, especially the Mormon God, loves women. So women should have the priesthood as well. That's my mindset back in the early 2010s was, as I was developing all this stuff. I even went to the temple and it was praying about women's equality. It was the first time I noticed that everybody moved their robes from one shoulder to the other to officiate in the Melchizedek priesthood. Even the women were officiating in the Melchizedek priesthood. Yeah. And I had already been to the temple.
That was taught openly that would be the case of the celestial kingdom, right?
Right. Because they're queens and priestesses to
queens and
the
priestesses.
Kings and priests.
Well, and I was always, I grew up with a strange form of misogyny where we would take women and put them on pedestals. And so like it was the kind of misogyny where like you're not sure if women poop, right? Because like they don't think like you because they think better, right? It's easier for them to be spiritual because they're not obsessed with sex all the time. They probably aren't masturbating as much as you.
So, I mean, just to this point, the first time I slow danced with a girl, I was surprised she was sweating.
Yeah.
Because girls didn't sweat.
Yeah, you don't sweat.
Only boys sweat. And
only boys do gross things.
And farted and stuff like that.
And, and I was like, oh, you say anything negative about your mom, it's like, that's how you get angry dad,
Right.
And so definitely I was told at a young age, well, the reason why women don't have it is because they don't need it. You need
They're
it.
so good. They're so good.
They're so righteous. Your goal is to find a woman that you can, not even that is worthy of you, but you are supposed to build yourself up to become worthy of a woman.
And the priesthood's going to help you do that.
And the priesthood's going to help you do that. Right. And so it's all about like honoring your priesthood and being, patriarchal in that way, but in a way where you're kind of like, you're not worshiping women because you're definitely above them and you're definitely leading them, but you see them as angelic and not like almost not of this world, not like you. Right. And so they need to be protected because they are naive and they are weaker. And they don't have that same, killer instinct when it comes to saying business or anything.
Mormon men have a lot to learn.
Yeah. So that, but that was the brand of misogyny that I had. So I would never like swat a woman on the ass or something like that, at least not until, after high school. But I was, I was respectful in a way that was also condescending.
Right.
If that makes sense.
So it works out. You and Krista get married and you start your family. And at some point, both you and I are going through something's wrong with the church, but in slightly different ways.
Well, you had been going through it for a long time, as far as I I could see you were on your way out.
Yeah, I remember the thing about you is you were edgy and of the world, but you also did your home teaching. You were dutiful.
Yeah.
Where I was I was lucky to get my home teaching done for last month by the 15th of the next month.
Which is so funny because you're such a sociable,
right? I should have loved. I should have loved to do home teaching.
You should have been the king of home teaching. Yeah.
But I think part of it was I would go home teaching, and most of the people you're going to are inactive.
Right. So they're not even
less active. Right. Or you go there, and they seem like they're living a fine life, and yet, you should come back to church and be as miserable as me. No. I mean, happier.
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 So happy. We had people come over today and tell Miranda that they were thinking of her.
Oh yeah.
You're not thinking of her. You want the tithing money. Get out.
That's right. And so what causes you to sort of back away from the church?
So one of those, it was a lot of little things. First of all, French mission. That prepared me for San Francisco. This was the first time I really knew a person that was gay, right? Like I had met people that were openly gay and could answer questions, right? And I was curious to learn about why you would choose such a thing. Of course, they don't really choose such a thing. But at the time, I didn't really understand that. But, they're like, here is my reality. And they were kind, generous, loving people. And some of them were monsters, just like straight people are sometimes monsters. And so you just come to the conclusion that they're human beings, and it's just exactly that same Mark Twain quote. You travel, and it just breaks through your ignorance in so many ways. So I was like, okay, I understand that marriage, at least temple marriage, has to be between a man and a woman, but I already felt like non-temple marriage was already invalid, right? That it was a nice, cute thing that non-members would do to feel good about themselves, but that it had no real authority because there was no priesthood, right?
So you're thinking 7 billion people or so are married, not in the temple. What's wrong with a few gay people being married as well.
Makes no difference, right? As long as the government doesn't tell, the Mormon church they have to have gay weddings and temples,
right?
Like, because even if you're straight, that's you still have to obey the law of chastity and stuff and lie about it,
right? And when you're in France, you hear that French requires people to get married first.
Yes, they do. Yes, that's true.
They don't allow temple marriages as a meaningful, governmentally recognized thing. So French people have to get married civilly first, and then
they can get their temple marriage. So
I probably heard that from you first.
You probably did. Yeah, I have to say, I would say I would bring home stories that would shock some of you, particularly your mother-in-law would not always be pleased about the stories I would tell.
That's right. That missionaries were human.
Yeah, I don't know how it came up at dinner, but somehow it come up that about how missionaries are pure or whatever, and I was like half the elders I knew were not virgins, and she was so appalled, and it wasn't that she was appalled at them; she was appalled at me that I would think such a thing, and I was like, bro, I was there. This is what they told me, right? Like,
it's like you're spreading an anti-Mormon lie.
Yeah, no, she's absolutely incredulous, and it's perhaps a bit of a shocking thing to say, but that's what I knew, and so I understood. Like, for me, the atonement was this beautiful thing. And I remember there was this girl that I don't even remember her name, but we both went to the Art Institutes, and she had told me in part of a conversation that she had grown up Mormon but wasn't going to church anymore. And I was like, well, why is that? Right. And she said, well, I had my wild years and I just did really bad things and I could never be forgiven. And I was like, well, what do you think the whole Jesus thing is about? I said, we don't go to church to celebrate how righteous
our perfectness, right?
We go there because we're not. We go there so, to be forgiven. I mean, and I had also read the book Believing Christ. I forgot who wrote that, but that was something my mission president made us read. That was one of the few things I appreciated from him. And it was this idea that when Christ says that through me you are saved, you should believe him. And so I really encouraged her to give herself a chance, because this was the power of the redemption of Christ. And she sent me a message on, it was probably MySpace at the time, some 6 months or whatever later, saying that she had really listened to what I said and had started going back. And I felt really pleased about that, because I felt like that's what it was really about. Right. But I was woefully naive about the truth of it, right? About there's Jesus, and then there's the organizations that work in his name, and that even the atonement itself would have some problems. It's being born inside of a cage, and then having the jailer eventually hand you the key, and then expect you to be grateful. That's what it is. People don't see it that way, but but I still love the idea of being magnanimous and giving people grace, and that yes, there is justice, and justice must be served, but there's also mercy. And there's the love aspect of it. And one of my big inspirations growing up was I used to watch a lot of Dragon Ball Z, and the main character in that is Goku, and like almost all of Goku's friends are former enemies, because he would never really kill anyone if he could help it, because if he killed them, he'd never get to fight them again. and then that would be boring. And so in a strange way, he was always merciful. And then people would always kind of see things his way, or there'd be a bigger threat on the horizon or whatever. And I was like, that's the ultimate victory, to turn people. I think that's what you really want to do. And so,
yeah, and I think now you would say to somebody, humans make mistakes, but the thing you need to do is forgive yourself, not rely on a Jesus figure to forgive you.
Yeah.
You have the power to forgive yourself. If you've committed crimes and you have to pay, a debt to society, you could pay that debt, but still you could move yourself forward, but instead of having that weigh down on you.
So even Mormon doctrine, at least the way I interpreted it, seemed to say exactly that. But Mormon culture is the opposite in a lot of ways. It's much more self-flagellation, right? There is forgiveness at the end, yes, but you have to fundamentally change everything about yourself. I mean, the natural man is an enemy to God, right? And so that's why there was so much like self-loathing and I would just trash myself all the time. Even after I left the church, I was still kind of in that mindset of, hey, I take responsibility for everything, but that also means I take the blame for everything that doesn't go well in my life. And there were so many things not going well in my life. And so it was really hard. And anyway.
But you start to become indifferent about the church, but something happens where you're like, I don't believe in God anymore.
Yeah. Sorry, I got a little off track there, but
sure.
Part of it was Prop 8. Part of it was Mormons themselves. Not that they offended me, but that they were so wrong about everything. And that they would lack so much magnanimity. And then there was also
it's like, well, we preach of Christ, but hell if we're going to act like Christ.
And then it was just I was saying before, like, people make mistakes, and that was like something I was really believing, right? That you give people second chance. Who doesn't make a mistake is God. And what I started seeing throughout time was mistake. And, so there was that shelf effect that we talk about a lot, right? And so my shelf got filled up with little injustices, but also, is God stupid? There was a lot of that stuff. Like, so why would God do polygamy knowing this would poison the well when it comes to missionary work in the future? Why would we do blacks in the priesthood if God would know that culturally speaking, this would be not acceptable in the future, right? Why would the prophet not say something about 9/11? Why would the prophet not say something about the financial crisis? Why wouldn't we? I think Sri Lanka was happening around this time. And then finally, with my children being born, it started to really hit me. And then particularly when my son was born, I remember him grasping my finger. And I remember thinking about Abraham. And I was listening to a lot of libertarian stuff at the time. And one of the big libertarian atheist thinking people at the time was Penn Jillette, the magician. And I would listen to a lot of his videos, and I got into some of his books. And one of the things he said that really resonated with me is, if God told you to kill your child, would you do it? If the answer is no, you're probably an atheist. If the answer is yes, please reconsider. And so, I'm looking at my boy, and I'm already emotional, right? just seeing him there. And I'm just thinking, if I knew it was God, like not even just like, oh crap, I'm hearing voices, I should go to a mental hospital. But like if I knew that it was God saying, kill your son or go to hell, that I would pick hell. And if that is the case, then maybe I really don't believe in this stuff. And that was I would say the first sort of epiphany that started to cause that Jenga tower to wobble. And then
right, you were at least an atheist according to Penn.
Yeah, according to Penn. But I thought he made a good argument, because it was like, okay, because a lot of my formative years are based on 9/11. And so it's like, did the terrorists believe in what they were doing? Right. I mean, they showed more faith than anyone I knew.
Right. If faith gets you to heaven, they're going to a higher heaven than any Mormon I ever knew.
And it's like, but of course we look at them like they're stupid, right? And like we're incredulous that they would possibly do such a thing. Well, what's the difference between that and what Abraham was willing to do? Because even though the angel comes down and says, hey, just kidding, you don't have to do it, he still would have done it. So he might as well have done it.
Right.
How do you go home that night as Isaac and go, this is my father?
There you go. He loves me so much. He was going to kill me today.
Like, holy crap. My dad's imaginary friend is more important than me. And my entire existence is dependent upon this man.
Is that pretty much the day you stopped going to church, or had you already been ambivalent?
Well, yeah, I mean, it was a lot of little things too. Just church was boring. No one ever talked about anything interesting anymore. Gospel doctrine was bull. I was the best teacher I knew because I was always willing to go off book and to talk about real life and to relate it to life in some way. I was not going to sit around and bear my testimony. I mean, I'd say one, but I wouldn't make that the whole thing. I was not one of these guys that would open up the manual and then ask people what they thought and try to turn it into a discussion. I mean, I was a teacher. I was treating it like it was my profession, right? And so
the teacher teaches.
And so I would sit through everybody else's lessons, and I would go home early sometimes. I would go home from Elders Quorum because I'd be like, this guy sucks. This guy, like, and I can understand if someone's awkward, right? I can understand if somebody like just isn't very good at something. But when I would
get trying,
if they're trying, then I would, if I could tell you were trying, I would try to come halfway with you, and I would ask all the questions or something, but 9 times out of 10, this guy rolled out of bed. He looked at the book, and we're not even using the scriptures, by the way. We're using those like every year was a different prophet of the church. And that's the driest stuff. Like that stuff is so boring. So I don't know who the heck we were even on that year. I wouldn't read it because I thought if the Book of Mormon is the book of books, every lesson should be derived from one of these.
That's right. If Mormonism was true, we shouldn't be reducing the number of hours we go to church. We should be going to church 10 hours every Sunday.
And conference would piss me off because the whole time they'd all be like verbally jerking off whoever was in charge. They'd be quoting Monson, and I liked Monson. They'd be quoting Monson more than they were quoting Jesus Christ. Like, how many Nephi quotes did we get this week? Like no love for Nephi, and I would be beside myself. And I thought these guys were so boring. And I just thought, this is not the church I even knew in France, because in France, you're on the struggle bus all the time. Like, there's no members around. So whoever you managed to have at church, you were a family. And they treated the missionaries like they were like celebrities, that you were important, right? It's not like how it is here in the States, right? It was like a big deal. And some of my most beloved places were tiny branches. There was one in Mont-de-Marsan, tiny little branch, it was like 15 people on a good day, right? And usually I was blessing the sacrament, passing the sacrament, and I was giving a lesson, and I was teaching gospel doctrine, right? Like, I love those people, and
you were like the pastor of the flock.
That's what I felt like. And I just felt like American Mormonism was so dead. It was so stale. It was so just devoid of faith and energy. It was apathetic. It was about
people in France are living life. They're eating cheese and they're drinking wine and they're having a good time.
Right. So yeah, there's that. And so anyway, the shelf eventually does break though. And I would say that the linchpin really was the Penn Jillette quote with Abraham.
Yeah.
And having my son be born. Now I'm still barely hanging on here. My oldest ends up getting baptized. My son does end up getting baptized. I don't perform either baptism. By this point, I'm out. I'm done. My dad performs both baptisms in my stead. And
we'll get to the rest of that story in a second.
Sorry,
but we'll now talk about how you started a podcast.
Okay. It's like the least important part, but as I was going through my faith crisis and feeling pretty alone, my podcast partner, who was the wife of one of my groomsmen, she is going through it kind of at the same time, a little bit before me. And so she's straight up on the Mormon church as a cult, like way before I am, right? And anyway, so we're like, we're going to talk about the two things that you shouldn't talk about: religion and politics, right? And so mainly it was she and I would take like a Saturday and talk for an hour just online, and just to have somebody to talk to. And of course, I would say most wives would not like this. Most wives would be like, you're going to spend an hour or two on a Saturday talking online with somebody else's wife, but it was never like that. I was not, we never like flirted or anything.
Did you commiserate?
It was about commiseration. That's the word, right? Stigma. That was the word I was trying to think of earlier. The stigma. Anyway.
Stigma.
So anyway, we started saying, we're spending a lot of time talking. I bet some people would appreciate hearing some of these thoughts, right? We're probably not the only ones going through it. And so we, after some coaxing, she finally agrees to turn it into a production. And so we created a podcast called Governing Ourselves. We would later rebrand it into Libertarians, which had always been like the joke name that we thought was too silly to do in the first part. And so I don't think you can even get the episodes anymore. I mean, like, nobody listened to it. There was nobody. About the time I stopped doing Libertarians, I started another podcast with my roommate from college that was about Dungeons and Dragons, and that's called Inspiration Point. That you can definitely still get. That's on Spotify. That's on everything, and I recommend it. I think it's great. I don't want anyone to hear libertarian anymore. I'm barely libertarian anymore. I'm still atheist, but now I've calmed down a lot. I'm less, because I was definitely like a fire and brimstone atheist for a little while.
Plus, as a Mormon, you're taught to trumpet the truth.
Absolutely, right. And I wasn't trying to like necessarily convert my family because that was always so touchy. I never even worked on Krista very much. I would answer her questions, but I didn't actively try to get her to stop going to church because I felt I would lose her.
Did you guys do anything where you said you're not going to pay tithing on your money, and she said, well, half of it's mine because we're married, and so I'll pay tithing on half?
Nope, we never had that because she didn't make any money, and she didn't think that the money I brought in was hers in that way. And so if she earned money through babysitting, she'd always have a little odd jobs or whatever. She would pay tithing on that and feel good about that. But once I said I don't want to pay tithing on my paycheck anymore, she respected that.
Yeah. And so
we'll go things not all women would have done.
We'll go straight to why I am even more the hero of your story.
It's so humble.
So from 2015 to 2020, would visit Adam, and in 2015, Adam would say, "Hey, you want to taste this whiskey and Coke, or rum and Coke or something?" Yeah. And I'd say, "Okay, I'll taste it." And my wife would roll her eyes and say, "My son-in-law is being bad, corrupting my husband and stuff." And then it was more, and then it was like in 2018, how about a beer? I'll try, if it's a peach beer or something, right? I'll try some.
Like go into the pantry, scoop out sugar, and add more.
Yeah, and like maybe I don't know
things with drinks.
And Krista was adding more alcohols to her cooking experience, and so she had no qualms about doing that. But she was very dutiful, young women's advisor, right?
She didn't know what to do. I mean, frankly, she was just trying her best to get through it.
She had to take.
Here's something.
Two or three kids. Oh yeah, go ahead.
That always made me feel terrible. By the way, I would see them walking to church together, and I felt like I was just the scum of the earth.
Right, as you should.
As I should. Kidding. And that was the other thing, was that the kids ruined going to church because they would fuss and want to run around. And I hated parents that let their kids do whatever during sacrament meeting. And so I'd take the kids out. So I'd never do sacrament meeting. And I hated being in the hallways. I was like, I might as well be home. So anyway, what was I saying? I was saying, so eventually I did start to experiment with alcohol. And to my surprise, when I would get buzzed, I would get really positive. And like the more you
were a happy drunk.
I was a happy drunk, and I was an unhappy sober person. And so before I got like actually medicated, this was like an unhealthy way to
self-medicate,
cope with depression. I was literally self-medicating. And so if Krista could drive me home, I would get drunk. And she liked it.
Oh, right. If you go out.
She liked it because she would get this side of me she used to know.
Right.
Because I had gotten so depressed and so grumpy and so unhappy, leading up to leaving. The only times where I was happy was when I couldn't think anymore.
That's right. I remember we would go to sushi sometime and you'd have 4 drinks and you'd tell me the first one is like you a little bit of buzz. The second drink is and by the fourth one, I'm
I have
drunk.
to cut myself off. Yeah.
I'm drunk. And so that's it. And then Krista would drive us home and you would maybe crash. I don't know. Or just sit around, be happy, whatever.
Yeah. I would just be on cloud 9.
So then COVID comes. And
I think that's like the linchpin of a lot of other people's stories at this point.
Yeah. And so, and I, like I said, like Adam said, a 15-year burn almost for me, slowly falling away from the church, right?
Yeah.
But I had no ammunition. I wasn't going to church from 2015 to 2020 because Kate Kelly got excommunicated. I stopped paying tithing, and then John DeLynn got excommunicated. And I thought the church was just excommunicating people for having a thought and expressing it. And we're in America, damn it. Right. That shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it should.
And so I don't want to go to church that does that. But I still don't. I'm still hoping for Jesus and Joseph. Right.
Right.
And so then COVID happens, and I do have more time to do some things, do some listening to John DeLynn, listening to other podcasts and stuff. And I'm just amazed at all the stuff that the church didn't tell us. That's just history. And the church would say it's anti-Mormon lies, but it was just history. So,
a lot of times they would quote from Mormon.org. It was crazy.
And so I go to Michelle at the end of COVID summer, and I say, you could stay paying tithing, you could stay going to church. I don't even care. But you have to know what I know, or else I'm going to go crazy.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you did. I'm so glad.
And so
that changed everything.
And in 1 week, Michelle says, Joseph Smith's a fraud.
Yeah.
And I was just starting to think the same thing too.
And as soon as she was done, Krista was done.
And she had to go on the phone. Krista, I have something to tell you, but we're going to wait until you do a visit. We're going to have a pleasant visit.
I was so
happy.
And
then when Krista went back home, and Michelle called Krista and said, let me tell you what I know. The church isn't true. And Krista was like, I'm not sure the church isn't true, but if you say so, what happens? What's the first benefit? No more garments.
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that
God
happens.
For that.
Right?
Oh, my God.
And so it's COVID, and they're not really meeting at church, but Chris is still trying to do her calling with Young Women's Advisor.
Both of them still did their calling even after they stopped believing, which was so funny.
But I was feeding her episodes of John DeLynn and other things, and so she was learning piece by piece, and then finally she could join you in unbelief, we'll say.
That was so great. But the only reason I think both of us came into marriage never, basically going right or die, and I'm really grateful for that. But she had every excuse to leave. I wasn't making much money. I wasn't doing priesthood stuff. I mean, if a faithful Mormon woman is going to get divorced, that's the recipe, right? And so, but the fact that I was happier while sinning, I think was something where she was able to, exercise some nuance and say, well, I'm actually okay with this. And, sometimes she would do little sinful things here and there but they were good for us. And
right. Yeah. Why am I happier sinning than obeying the rules?
But when mom says she's out, that's it. Because I mean, Michelle is everything to Krista. If Michelle says that the sky is yellow, it's yellow. You know what I mean?
That's right.
Like she loves her mommy so much.
It's pretty much a cult of personality.
It really kind of is, And so never mind all the stuff I had said for years, whatever. I'm just the husband. But mommy thinks something, well, that's it. But a
So
lot of that is ethos, because Michelle's just a genuinely good person.
Yeah. So now you and the kids don't have to go to church. How much fun is Sundays?
Yeah. Well, it's funny. We go and hang out with my dad, so it feels like going to church a little bit, except for sports is on.
Right. And you're eating the whole time, which is different than church.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I love not going to church. Right. My podcast partner, Lisa, she would devour, conference every time it came on.
As a true believing Mormon.
No, as an anti.
Oh, afterwards.
Yeah, afterwards.
To try to catch them on their words.
Yeah, she'd be like, "You know what they said?" And I'd be like, "No, I don't know what they said." Because part of the benefit is because I never liked conference. Right. I think there was one time on my mission I pretended to like conference. Other than that, I always hated conference. And
the only thing I liked about it is we didn't have to go to church.
Right. But then I had to sit on the couch and do nothing else.
Right.
So it was horrible. But I was like, I have no idea what they're saying. I mean, but they always say the same thing. So what? I would tease my parents sometimes. I'd say, "So what's the news? Huh? Oh, the building a temple? That's not news. Tell me when a revelation happens. Just what is one thing that got revelated this week? Huh? Anything? No, it's been 6 months. Oh, there's because a lot of stuff happened in the news, but we've got 13 technically prophets, and nothing." Okay.
That's right. I remember that the old, hey, our church
stop looking at porn. That's all they know.
Our church is the best because we have prophets that lead us today, and twice a year we get to hear them. And people would say, "Oh, what'd they say last conference?" I don't know. Nothing.
Read your scriptures, pay your tithing.
Yeah, the basics.
It was never anything. Yeah. I'm like, where's that sealed, 2/3 of the Book of Mormon? That's what I want. When's that coming out?
That's right. How can Jesus come if we don't have the sealed portion? If we're not doing all these other things, if the church isn't growing by leaps and bounds like it was in the 80s and 90s,
well,
how come all that stuff stopped?
How does the prophet not have a cabinet position? Right? How come Hinckley and those guys, how come they're not in the situation room feeding the president information?
Right. Because if they really were seeing the future, were prophesying, they'd be somebody you would want if you're going to.
And you know what? It would be faith promoting. People would get baptized. People would be like, "Oh, they literally can prophesy. There was going to be a 9/11." Yes, some people would say, "Oh, they caused it." Right? There'd be conspiracy theories. But how many people would get freaking baptized if you could predict a 9/11?
That's right. That would be amazing.
And they're like, "Oh, that's not how faith works." Shut up! It is.
It'd be almost miraculous.
Of course, it would be. If I saw Superman catch an airplane in a baseball stadium, I would be like, "Oh, there's something to Superman."
That's right. Yeah. So anyway, so you became an apostate, and how shitty.
That was not the first time I was called an apostate. My mission president called me apostate.
How shitty has your life been the last 10 years?
Actually, it's been great.
It's been a slow improvement, right?
I don't think life got good for me until my 30s. Like my 20s, I don't even know what happened. I was just miserable. Like most of my 20s, I was just miserable. Which is weird because 20s are when you're supposed to have fun. But I'm 42 now, and I'm doing better this year than I've done my entire adult life. And it is, I feel like I didn't grow up until I left the church. I felt like the church had always infantilized me, looking back.
Right. Because the other side of blaming yourself is if anything good happens, it's because God did it.
It's because God
or somebody else.
It's like, no, if I'm going to take the blame, I'm also taking the credit. These Christmas gifts, they're for me, asshole.
That's right.
Listen up.
To hell with Santa.
Yeah. No, I was actually really against it, but Krista vetoed me on that one. And it's fine.
Yeah. So life has been pretty good for you, especially the last.
And it's not like I'm swimming in success. I have a normal job. Mm-hmm. I teach high school, but I teach a lot of subjects I really enjoy, that I find interesting. I have good students. I have an excellent classroom. I have great coworkers. I like my boss 9 times out of 10.
Are you like one of the longest tenured teachers in your school?
Well, we don't have tenure because Arizona.
No, but whatever you call it.
I've been there for 10 years.
Right.
But yes, I have no tenure. But yeah, I've been there for like 13 years. And, I'm well established here. I've moved into the community at last. I spent like 11 years commuting an hour out and an hour back every day. Now it's 12 minutes.
Right.
And I love that. So I'll tell you what. And it's developing your own philosophy is really important, because I think one of the things that I used to ask to atheists, I used to say, why don't you just kill people? Right? Why don't you just sin and do anything you want? And again, this was another great Penn Jillette quote, where he was like, I have killed and raped everybody I've ever wanted to kill and rape. And that number is 0. Like you've heard that. Right.
That's right.
And, now I find myself on that end and saying that. But the question does come down to, well, what is good, and what is righteous? What is justice? Why live? Right. What is your raison d'etre, to be French, and it's something that every human being has to cultivate for themselves. They have to figure out what that is.
Right, because the church tells you, here's all the boxes that you need to check. The church gives you a patriarchal blessing that says, here's the plan of your life.
They have a recipe for happiness. There's
no individuality. It's all built to support the church and its goals. And right. So, yeah, it's that's one thing. Stopping belief is trying to think of like, what's my authentic self? Right.
Yeah.
Who is that person?
And right. So I used to say anything good about me is because of Jesus.
Right.
But the other side of that is nothing's good about me. Right. Like you're exercising this sort of false modesty, but you're also insulting yourself. And so I had incredibly low self-esteem while also having a big ego, which is really weird, right? So I could think stupid things like, oh, I'm going to give this ugly girl a thrill, while also feeling like I was lower than worms.
Right.
That's no kind of way to live. That's no kind of way to look at the universe. And it's like, well, did the other people grew up in the church and they didn't see life that way? Okay. My particular experience with religion and culture and everything else mixed with my DNA led me to see the world a certain way, right? But now I have the freedom to take a step back and examine the world and also examine myself, and to say, what do I think justice is? And do I just think that, or am I willing to act on that? Am I willing to uphold that? What does that mean to me? What does it mean to me to be honorable? Because I think that a lot of things that young men are taught are part of toxic masculinity. But there are wonderful things in masculinity that should absolutely be preserved. And we call that honorable behavior, right? And I was listening to a YouTube channel today explaining the meaning of the tale of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. And I highly recommend that people check out the film that came out a few years ago called The Green Knight. And I think it almost perfectly encapsulates what it is to be a virtuous person. And I say that from an atheist perspective. And so it also helps that one of my good friends is the philosophy teacher at our school. And he and I would spend hours debating about whether or not there is a God and not get upset at each other. Like he's a lot like you in that he can have the discussion without injecting moral or like personal stakes.
Right.
Right. Like these are never attacks on me. They're Adam's thoughts, and that's interesting.
That's right.
And we can discuss that. And right, he's a Christian, he's a Calvinist, right? And we hang out. We'll have, a beer and talk for 2 hours. And it's great. And I've learned a lot about how to be a more articulate atheist from our discussions. I've learned some of the pitfalls that are common among my type. I've better understood Christian apologetics because Mormons don't really have apologists. They're so far down the totem pole of theological understanding.
Right. Professional. Right. Top notch.
There's no William Lane
amateur
Craig of Mormonism.
Right.
And I think, and I can see through all of Craig's arguments, but he's so far above anyone that Mormonism ever produced.
Right. Because he doesn't have to say golden plates and angels.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, and also like,
and a fictitious group of people that were spread across North and South America that there's no evidence of.
Right. Yeah. And so, I never do it like the ontological or deontological, not deontology, that's something different, but the argument from design. Like I never knew of these arguments until two things. I started talking to Christians and I started reading Dawkins. And I got into Dawkins. Of course, I got into Hitchens. But I will say Hitchens is more just candy. He's fun. Whereas, Dawkins was a lot more informative until he got into all the turf stuff later on. And so, yes, if you can't tell, socially, I'm quite liberal again, right? I guess I always have been, because I've always felt like if you're not hurting people or taking their stuff, you should be able to pretty much live the way you want to live, right? It's until you infringe on somebody else's liberty that, that's where law comes in. That's where justice comes in. Because the aim of government has to be justice. And the only reason you need justice to be enforced by the government is to protect the least among us.
Right.
It's to help the poor. It's all that Jesus-y stuff. And yet, who do all the evangelicals go for? But just the worst misrepresentation, the last kind of person that I think Jesus would vote for, right? He'd be like, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. But this guy doesn't deserve anything. Like, get this guy out of here. He's crazy, right? I think that's the way he would probably see it. He'd be like, I'll save a soul if I can. I'll do my best. But, the guy's got to do a little bit of something.
Yeah, I've talked to a few historians about maybe doing a show about the Constitution and the current threats to the Constitution, sort of from a Mormon standpoint, right? And so I think that would be a good show. So anyhow, thanks, Adam, for bearing your soul. And I'll tell it that it's not the first time, but since I have one daughter, you are my favorite son-in-law.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks everybody for watching. We're just starting 2026 and we got a long way to go this year. So what do they say? Batten down the hatches and prepare for lots of storms coming or something like that.
Drop your socks and grab your throttle.
That's right. Have a great year this year. Bye-bye.
Bye.